What's up, Titans fans? Welcome to another episode of Titans Global Podcast, brought to you by Red Zone Builders. I'm your host, Maximus Titan Fan, and with me, as always, is my good buddy Link. What's up, man?
What's going on, guys? It's going to be a great show tonight. Got a lot to talk about. We got preseason game recap. We've got roster cut analysis. And most importantly, we've got real regular season NFL football coming up in less than 2 weeks. So a lot to get into tonight. But as always, make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, make sure to comment. Most importantly, make sure to comment. We want to see you guys in the chat. Agree with us, disagree with us. Going to be a lot of controversial stuff tonight. So we want to know your thoughts as well. So let's hop right into it.
Absolutely, and tonight we're going to cover a little bit of the preseason game to, talk that off, and then we're going to get right into our roster predictions. So yeah, we want to hear what you guys think as well. As far as the game goes, hey man, it's the first time we've went undefeated in the preseason
Since
2003.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hang a
I
banner.
said that on the couch. I said that on the couch. My wife's like, you should say that on the show. All right.
Yeah. I mean, if it were the Colts,
anyway,
they would definitely hang a banner. So
for sure. Yeah. Yeah. And 30-27, 30 points, hey.
Yeah, tough to do that against air the last 2 years, it feels like. So definitely a bright spot.
Yeah, you just don't see the Titans scoring 30 points a lot. So a lot of Titans fans excited about that. So I was happy about that as well. But to get right down into the bones of it, Will Levis, man, he looked exactly like I wanted him to look in this game. Very crisp. Very crisp. On the first drive, I think he went 4-4 for 65 yards and a touchdown. And then, no, he didn't score a touchdown, did he?
Did not.
And then he ended up 7 of 8, 118 yards. But the point is, we look great. I was a little taken back that we didn't score 2 touchdowns in the first 2 drives. But hey, scoring drive nonetheless. I'll take it. As a Titans fan, I'm pretty happy. So, what do you think about his performance?
Yeah, no, like you said, crisp is the best way to describe it. Definitely very intentional with the offense. And got to see a little bit of the dynamic of what Callahan wants to do. A lot of screen game, lots of screen setups. Again, we saw the guards being pulled, a lot of good blocking schemes. As we've gone through this preseason, we've seen more and more of, I guess, the incorporation of things they want to do in the regular season. And hey, if Sunday's any indication of that, I think it's definitely going to be a successful offense. Going to be very different than what we're used to seeing with Titans offenses. So yeah, I think it was good. He was decisive, made the right decisions in my mind. So yeah, it was good in my eyes. Like you said, I think that you kind of want to turn those into touchdowns, especially when you're that close to the end zone.
Yep.
But it could have been worse. Could have been a lot worse. So yeah, smart decisions. That's what you want to see from your future franchise quarterback, hopefully. And I was pretty happy with it.
Yeah, I was too, man. I'm not gonna lie. I did want to see a little bit better, but hey, kind of segueing off of that, him and Calvin Ridley finally look like they got it a little synced up, man. He looked good. So did Calvin Ridley. I have to say, 2 receptions, 39 yards. The one I think was 22. I don't know. 22 yards, I think, is what it was. I don't have it in my notes. I don't know why. But point is, I think Ridley did a really good job as well. Anything you got to...
No, yeah, I agree. Kind of we saw for the first time throw into the spots where Ridley was supposed to be. Seems like most of training camp, they've had trouble getting on the same page. That was not the case Sunday. Seemed like, Levis was pretty confident knowing where he was going to be. Ridley was in the right spots, good route running. The twitchiness that we've seen all training camp, it was definitely there on Sunday. So, yeah, happy with the performance from both guys. And I think, once you get Hopkins back out there, it's going to be that much more dangerous. When you got those 2 guys on the outside, it's tough to cover. I mean, it's really tough to cover. Plus Boyd in the slot. That connection's been there all training camp. So to see him get back out there, to see the chemistry between those guys, definitely something special.
Yeah, and I hope that continues. I hope it actually just gets better and better. What's up, Hugo? All right, so on to another. This is almost an annoying subject for me, but I have to say it. I have to agree with it finally. DMR, uh, guy just went off, man. I mean, I kept waiting for him to fall off, but the dude just kept stacking practice and kept stacking games, and he looked like almost a starting tight end in this game. So, got to give it up to DMR.
Yeah, it reminds me of Chig with a little bit more consistency. I feel like, and I felt like in week two, he kind of. I feel like he had kind of locked up his roster spot already. That was debatable, but definitely after this week's performance, you can't put a guy like that on a practice squad. He's going to get picked up somewhere. Starting caliber tight end, and with Wiley being in protocol, it's we're not 100%. He's going to be back for week one, and to have a guy like that on the roster just gives you that much more of a threat. So yeah, absolutely think he locked up his roster spot for sure.
Yeah, and then I know it's only a couple plays, but Trevonde's I can't say his first name. Sweat looked really good.
Yep.
Y'all are going to see me trip up a lot on names, by the way, when we get to the roster point, but that's okay. We're going to get through it.
Yeah, Sweat for me, I mean, eating up blocks. The dude's a menace on the inside. And then there was one play when he was chasing down. It was before Radler came in, I believe. But to see him chase down a quarterback is something special. I mean, to see a man of that size move that quickly, it's something absolutely incredible. The ceiling for him is to me, it's extremely high. I wasn't sold on him during the draft process. He's completely proved me wrong. I think him and Simmons are going to be a problem on that interior defensive line. And, he's going to get to the point where teams are going to have to start doubling him if he's able to keep this momentum up. And then, you leave Simmons without a double. So just the way that I feel like they're going to be able to play off each other, I hope they get that figured out quick, because if they do, it's going to be a very, very interesting season on that defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited about that myself. Just to glaze over a couple guys that looked really good in the game. James Williams looked like he's looked all preseason. Nice. He was a little flat-footed on one run that got lost up the middle, but other than that, he looked really good. Caleb Murphy, again, looked like he's looked all offseason. Pretty good. Jalen Harrell. Again, like he has all off season. He looked pretty damn good. All three of those guys I want on my team at the end of the day.
Yep. Yeah, for me, it's about stacking games. And there's just some guys throughout this training camp who have been able to stack. Guys like Jaquan Jackson, guys like, I hate to say it, Chance Campbell, prayers up to him. I think everybody's kind of heard the news about that. But just these guys who've been able to come into the preseason, stack practices, stack games. I mean, that's really all you can ask for when you're looking at depth on a team. And for them to come in and make an impact early, that definitely shows their capability as an NFL football player. Super excited to see these guys, not just for this year, but for the future of this team, for sure.
Yeah, and that's another thing we'll talk about a little bit later. But youth is a big movement, I think, going on right now. But a few other people I want to talk about, Jaquan Jackson had some really nice returns in the game. Nothing like he did the other day, but still some really nice returns. Eric Garror had one or two actually also, which I think is important. And Ryan Stonehouse didn't really need him as much. Yeah. I was hoping we'd at least get to see a couple, but then I thought to myself, why are you hoping that you get to see a couple? That's stupid, man. Just, be happy that you only got 2 punts the entire, So I was pretty happy with that as well. And then the almost disastrous play on the kick. I mean, holy crap. Thank God that John Njoku can move like that man can move as big as he is. Otherwise, we would have given up a touchdown there if he hadn't forced him out at the end.
Yeah, and for me, he made the first one because they tried to ice him, Made the first one pretty easily, and then came out for the second one, and it was short and to the right. So, yeah, I mean that was unfortunate. That's another guy that we're going to kind of get into, I think, because obviously Folk's going to be the starter. But what do you do with that kid? I mean, do you think he clears practice squad? Do you think they can sneak him on that practice squad without somebody picking him up?
I'll say this. If we can't, then we can find a kicker just as talented as he is in the next draft.
I agree. I
Off
would agree
season.
with that.
I'll say
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
I don't think he's like we talked about last week. He's not the Stonehouse type of guy that you just can't pass up on, but still a pretty good kicker. I think he might actually hit somewhere. But I don't know, man. I mean, around the league, I don't know if you saw that 70, what was that, a 76 or 78 yard field goal? I was like,
yeah,
Jesus.
and supposedly I can't remember the name, but supposedly he hits those consistently in practice, from what reports are. So it's a new league. I mean, these kickers now were absolute monsters. I mean, they're coming from Australia, they're coming from New Zealand. I mean, I don't know where they're finding these dudes on the soccer field or whatever, but absolutely ridiculous kicking league right now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't care where you're finding them. I'm enjoying it, man. If you can get a field goal from 70 yards, dude, I mean, you're pretty much scoring every drive, even if you don't move the ball that much. Oh, that's like New York Giants' best friend.
Yeah, pretty much.
Sorry. So yeah, that's pretty much the wrap up of the game. I think there's not really that much to talk about. Yay, we went, 3-0. Now we're ready to see the full season. Although I will say we did get to see a little bit more of what I think we're going to look like more than the first two games. Moving the ball down the field, using the running backs, like you said, in the screen game. We're going to see a lot of things that are not really what we're used to, but I think it's going to work in a way that, I mean, you saw it.
Yeah, if I describe this offense right now, for me, it's a chain moving offense. I mean, they're determined to get ahead of the sticks on first down, and then keep the momentum rolling. And if you can keep moving the ball, even if you're taking field goals like we saw in the first couple drives, if you can move the ball, give your defense a break, keep the opposing defense on their toes, that's what wins football games. It doesn't have to be a shot play every single play. And I think Levis is kind of starting to figure that out, especially with the screen game. Hey, if we can just move the sticks, if we can keep getting first downs, we're going to win the game. I mean, that's the biggest part of football. So whether it's touchdowns, whether it's field goals, whatever it is, keep the defense on their toes, keep your defense rested, and that's what's going to get it done this year.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. I mean, all you got to do is keep it close and have that huge play in your back pocket. Although I did not like the reversal play. What are you doing, dude? Quit trying so hard.
Yeah. A little too cute on that one.
Yeah, don't get gadgety on us, Callahan. I mean, you've done a great job so far of just making great offensive play calls, but try that cutesy. I didn't care for that very much.
Yeah. Yep.
Mainly because it didn't work. I mean, if it had worked, we'd all be like, "Oh, he's a genius! Look at that stuff. He's just cooking up weird stuff, and it still works." But it's wild how much your definition or your opinion comes on something, whether it works or not.
Well, and hey, this is what preseason's for, right? You try stuff, you do different things, you figure out what works, what doesn't work. If they're gonna do little trickery stuff like that, I'd rather see it in the preseason than the regular season. And hey, if it works, it works. I mean, I'm not gonna be mad about it, but they do have the speed to try some of the stuff like that. I feel like this offense first just needs to focus on being successful at what they do best, and that's the short to medium, intermediate pass game, taking your shots when you need them and keeping things on the outside. That's what's going to be successful this year. I don't need double reverses and, crazy formations. Just keep it simple. Keep it simple for now.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think that's,
Now you gave up
You know,
your offense last year when you kept starting Henry, is my opinion, but I'm not gonna get back into that.
yeah, I was gonna say, man, I'll be honest with you, dude. Yeah, it's a debate that's it's long rested. Although it's not rested in my house. My wife continuously tells us how stupid we were for letting Derrick Henry go. And I keep trying to explain to her why.
Yeah,
And why it was a good move for us personally.
Yep.
And she's like, no, y'all are dumb.
Yeah, he doesn't
So
work
I
in this
get it.
offense. He doesn't work in this offense, and I'm going to go out on a limb. I don't think he works in Baltimore's offense. I know everybody's talking about the dual threat with him and Lamar Jackson. I don't like the combination, just plain and simple. Just because you've got a quarterback in Lamar Jackson that's super talented. He can get to the outside. He's quick. He can do what he needs to do. And then you've got a bull rusher in Derrick Henry. But the thing is, if you're able to clog up the middle, get your safeties on the outside, and shut both of those down, you force Lamar Jackson to pass, or you force Derrick Henry to take those 2 steps and end up in the backfield the same way he did in Tennessee. So I feel like teams are going to catch on to that with Baltimore. And if they try to get bullheaded and do what Tennessee did with Derrick Henry, they're going to have the same success and failures that Tennessee had. So, I might be crazy and going out on a limb, but I'm not putting either one of those guys on my fantasy team this year. I don't think it's going to work. I think Derrick Henry is a great player and a great person, but he's not built for this NFL. And with what Tennessee's doing and what they've moved to, he wouldn't work in this offense. He didn't work in last year's offense, and I wish him the best. But I'm still kind of happy that we moved on from the Derrick Henry experience, as much as I love the guy.
And this is where we disagree, because I actually think he's going to flourish in Baltimore. I think he's going to work well there. Basically, because if they tried to play Baltimore like they play us and just blitz crazy, which is really the only way to stop Derrick Henry, is to keep a lot of guys in the box. We've seen that. Lamar Jackson is talented enough to get those medium to long range throws. And he's a little joysticky, man, so he can look like he's going to run and stop at the last second throw. But I don't know. I feel like a lot of it's going to rest on. I think we're going to see how high Lamar Jackson's football IQ is.
Exactly.
How about that?
Yep.
That's what it really relies on. Yep. Because if his IQ is as high as everybody says it is, then they're
off to the races. Yep.
I was going to say they're Super Bowl bound, man. But if not, then that might not work so well.
Yep.
All right, so roster predictions. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to show each of our roster predictions on each position that we're talking about. Don't peek. Because we just made a list, But we're going to start off with the obvious, and we, both of us made these lists before today. So
before trades, before injury announcements, I made mine first thing this morning into yesterday afternoon. Yeah,
I made mine last night. So So none of this stuff is in there. Chance Campbell, even though I did actually go back and edit that one because I heard about Chance Campbell and I was like, oh crap, I need to fix that. But other than that, I didn't fix any of the other ones. So there you go. But obvious, easy one. Quarterback. Here's what you got, Link. You got Levis and Rudolph. And before we made the trade, you didn't keep Malik Willis.
That's correct. Yep.
Tell us why.
Reason for that being, and I had some doubts, especially when the NFL, the Players Association, they vetoed the rule as far as being able to elevate your emergency quarterback from the practice squad. I started to kind of question my decision a little bit, but when it came down to it, I went through my roster first and I left them off. And then I started from the bottom and worked my way up. And what it came down to was receiver, running back, third quarterback. And I felt like your value and your talent was better with your lower end receivers and your lower end running backs than the value you'd get out of Malik Willis as a third quarterback. Because I feel like if it comes down and you're in an emergency situation, you can find a replacement for Willis easier than you can find a replacement for your fifth wide receiver, your third running back, your fourth tight end. So for me, It was just the value that you're getting him at that point for isn't worth it. It's just not worth it. That's the reason I left him off initially. I did thought he, obviously he put some good tape out this preseason. For me, it just wasn't enough to say that he could come in. He's not going to win you any games. And based on previous history, he does have the potential to lose you a game. And for me, it just the benefit didn't outweigh the negative for me on Willis.
Yeah, man, I'll say this. Before I say any of this, by the way, happy for Willis. Happy for Malik Willis. Glad he got traded. Glad he's got a backup role. He might actually see some starting time if Love goes down. God willing, he doesn't. But if he does, Willis might see some starting time. And I'm really happy. People in Green Bay seem to be happy about it very, very much too, from what I can gather. Which, I know you have an opinion on that, Link, and we're going to get to that. But I'm just going to throw up mine. We had the exact same thing. I didn't have Malik Willis. Even before he was traded, I didn't have Malik Willis making this 53-man roster. And a lot of people are, I've stated that a few times in the offseason in some comments. Not, I didn't post it like as a post because I knew that would garner a bunch of unwanted attention. But the point is look, man, just like Link said, you can find that emergency third quarterback if you need him. This is barring that Will Levis gets injured and Mason Rudolph gets it, which I know that can happen. Knock on wood that it doesn't happen, but I know it can happen. But the likelihood of that happening versus both your starting running backs getting hurt, that's a pretty good likelihood right there.
Yep.
I would say the percentage of running back injury to quarterback injury is way higher. Same thing with wide receivers, same thing with cornerbacks, same thing with outside linebacker. You're starting to see a trend here.
Yep.
Third quarterbacks aren't as important as backups in other positions, and that's just a fact. It sucks, but it's a fact. So I thought it was funny when I got to see your list. Well, not funny. All right, that's not the right word. I thought it was interesting that both of us said that even before the trade, Malik Willis isn't going to make this team.
Yep.
But glad we got something for nothing.
Yeah, the incompetence of Green Bay, in my opinion, was absolutely perfect for the Titans because the Titans win in this situation. They get compensation for a guy that they were likely going to cut anyway. Malik wins because he got enough film on tape that he's able to be a backup in the NFL. Green Bay loses in this situation. It may be a little bit of a rant, but absolutely ridiculous that Green Bay would give up even a 7th-round pick when I thought the best the Titans could get is a 6th. So for them to call and offer a 7th a day before cut days when the guy's getting cut anyway is just stupid to me. The only defense Green Bay has is, hey, if we don't trade for him, and he gets cut, he kind of has it becomes an open market. He can kind of choose, kind of where he wants to go. He's got a little more choice. But let's be real. How many teams in the NFL out of 32 or 31, if he's not on the Titans, how many are calling Malik Willis saying we want you here as a backup? So Green Bay already had a leg up in that situation. I think they easily could have got him tomorrow at the deadline. They could have got him on waivers. So for them to give up a 7th-round pick is a real J-Rob move to me. I don't understand it. I think it's stupid, but great for Malik Willis and great for the Titans to get more than a bag of footballs for the guy.
Well, I will say this because I know we talked about this before, a little bit pre-show. I didn't know you had all that feeling, but I think it's warranted, to be honest. But I will say this: I just thought of this; it just popped in my head. I wonder if there were rumblings, like at Seattle.
Possibly.
I know.
Possibly.
I know.
And I'm not going to put anything out of the realm of possibility, but if the Titans are giving him up for a 7th, who was calling with something better? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You see, if there was rumblings, if there was interest, I feel like they'd have more calls than Green Bay and a 7th-round pick. If it was going to become a competition, I think a 6th-round pick gets thrown out. I think the best they could have got is a 6, but if there's a real competition, you might hear a 5th-round pick being thrown out. I mean, the guy's still an NFL caliber quarterback. He just has a long way to go before he's able to be a starter. So if there was a competition, I feel like they would have got more than a 7th for him. So I don't buy into that.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, I agree with you on that now that I'm, that's why I like you, man. You bring me around to earth every now and then. But not to bash on Malik Willis. I'm super happy for him. That's
Absolutely.
the bottom line. Really.
Absolutely.
I've talked about it a few times. My father-in-law is a huge Green Bay fan. We were texting back and forth as soon as, after I found out about it. And I was like, I honestly feel like he's going to give you a better option than you had before, and I feel like he's going to have a better opportunity. So good for him. Good for Green Bay, I guess.
How upset are you? What is it? Week 3 they play Green Bay. Week 3 or week 4? Okay. How upset are you if Jordan Love goes down in week 2? Malik Willis gets the start, beats the Titans at home. I mean,
if he beats the Titans,
I'm at
pissed.
Nissan Stadium as a starting quarterback with Green Bay.
I'll have a hard time doing that after show because
we might skip that one.
I was gonna say you'll see a lot of long pauses of me just because I don't know what to say about that. That would be terrible. Let's pray to God that doesn't.
Not to put that out in the universe. I'm just crazier things have happened.
That is true. And that seems to be how our luck goes. We have the kind of luck, if you didn't have bad luck, you wouldn't have any.
And I will say this does point out, when Green Bay is preparing for that game, he's going to be out there on the practice field. He's going to be Will Levis. I mean, he's going to be the guy they go to because he knows this offense. I mean, he's been here for 3 years, and obviously it's a new coaching staff, but he does know this offense. So that is something to look at with the way Green Bay prepares for this Titans team. Might be coming out with a little inside information just because he's been here. He knows the ins and outs. He knows the scheme. So gonna be real funny to see how Tennessee prepares for that and kind of changes things up for that game.
Well, I will say this: if they're picking Malik Willis's brain for information, I think I'm all right with that. I mean, I'm not saying the guy ain't got a high IQ or anything like that. It sounded bad. Damn, I didn't mean to sound like that. I just meant this is his first year in the system, and
You're right,
he didn't really pick up on systems really quick. But I mean, he has progressed a lot in the offseason. I'm not trying to take anything away from him. I'm just saying.
Absolutely not. Yep.
I'm not that worried about what he's going to reveal to him. But anyway, let's move on before I say any other horrible stuff. Running backs.
Mm-hmm.
We'll start with yours. This is where we differ a little bit.
Yeah, I've got 4 running backs. Initially, I had it at 3. Again, I kind of went through my locks, and then I came back up and filled in where I thought there was a possibility of somebody coming in and taking a spot. And that was one where I feel like Chestnut is definitely your go-to running back 3. Most of these that I put on here are not in any type of order between starter, backup, anything like that. But this one actually ended up being that way because I feel like Chestnut offers you more in the run game, but Haskins is still such a threat on special teams that I feel like it's hard to leave him off this roster. And with the way special teams are now and they're going to be this year, I feel like a guy like that's just kind of invaluable. And to put him on the practice squad, it would be a disservice to this team. So, yeah, I would not be shocked at all to see 4 running backs come down tomorrow at 3 o'clock.
I agree it could happen. But that's not what I put as my final. I had 3 running backs, but I did agree with you that Julius Chestnut was over Hassan Haskins because I do think he gives you a little bit more in the running back, catching, blocking. I just think he's an all-around better back than Haskins. But you're right, Haskins is a gem on special teams, so not to take anything away from him, but that was our first disagreement on the roster so far. But hell, we're only 2 positions in, so. So then, all right. So here's where things I had to shift a little bit because I had a bunch of it wrote down before I actually put it into typo form or typed format, whatever. But wide receiver, let's get into that. These are your picks.
Mhm.
What's your picks for wide receiver?
Yeah, Hopkins obviously number one there. I do think he's ready for week one. If not, you could maybe throw a guy like Kearis Jackson or Phillips into this, but I definitely think Hopkins is your number one, and these are the 6 that I would stick with all year. Ridley, obviously at number 2. We talked about his connection with Levis in this last preseason game. Thought that was great. Tyler Boyd's your slot guy. I mean, that's a given. Again, him and Levis' connection, it's been there all practice, all training camp, and it's shown up in this last preseason. And then NWI, I mean, the consistency hasn't changed. He's a physical guy. He's going to come out. He's going to be available, and he's going to make catches. And that's all you can ask for in a fourth wide receiver. Burks, obviously, I don't be shocked if we see another trade. I'm going to say that. I feel like there is some trade capital with Burks. Wouldn't shock me to see him traded. If he's not traded, I do think he makes this roster cut. You've got him. You still got him on a cheap contract. The upside to keeping him is better than the downside of letting him go. And then Jaquan Jackson. This is Jaquan, not Kearis, but Jaquan Jackson, he's been nothing but consistent. He's stacked multiple practices, multiple preseason games. I think he's eventually going to turn out to be an X factor for this team. And I stopped at 6. Thought about doing 7, but I feel like with the injuries, with the inconsistency, Kyle Phillips is on the outside looking in. Kearis Jackson's on the outside looking in. I just feel like those guys haven't done enough and shown enough to make this initial cut. Still think they're good practice squad guys. Don't be surprised if there's an injury to see one called up, but I stayed with 6 on this initial roster.
Well, first of all, Matthew, I think he just answered you on that one, but I think our wide receivers were exactly the same. DeAndre, Ridley, Boyd. I don't know why I didn't give NWI a number. I don't know. Treylon Burks and Jaquan Jackson. So yeah, I think they're exactly the same. But hey, man, I agree. And Jaquan Jackson reminds me of another Jackson, Deshaun Jackson. I don't think he's there yet, but I think he could be. That could be his ceiling, or maybe beyond. I don't know.
Do you think he's the direct backup in the slot position?
No.
Okay.
You mean like directly behind Boyd?
Do you think at the slot position, not at the 1 or 2, not on the outside, but at the slot position, do you think if, let's say, something crazy happens and Boyd goes down, I mean, between NWI, Burks, and Jaquan Jackson, who do you feel more comfortable with in the slot? Because, I mean, I feel like Jaquan's been more consistent than Burks has. And I also feel like NWI is more of an outside player than a slot player. So with that being said, do you feel like he's a direct backup at the slot position?
That's a very good question. And no, I don't. I actually think NWI is, yeah, Matthew's getting it. Look at him. He's typing as fast as he can to get it in there. But yeah, NWI is the backup, I think, directly behind Boyd. Just because I guess it depends on what kind of play you're playing.
See,
I mean, if you're going
right.
Yeah, if you're going with a slant route or something like that, I don't know. You might think about Jackson, especially if you're going something for a deep ball.
I mean, when I think bubble screens, when I think short slants, I think Jaquan Jackson. That's why I do feel like his snap count is going to be a lot higher than most people expect at the end of the season.
I'll say this, man. On that, I think it might have been this game. The way he curled, no, it wasn't this game. It was the last game, I feel like. But the way he curled around, it was the Seahawks. Came back to the ball and caught the ball on the short curl route. Or that's what I call it, curl route. You can call it whatever you want, but dig route, whatever. But that particular trait as a wide receiver rookie coming out of a small school like Tulane, man, hats off to you, dude. You're already showing you have the capabilities of being an NFL great, especially in the slot. So I understand why you're asking me that. It's a very good question, and I guess my answer would be both.
Okay.
I think it
Depends
comes
on the
down to
play,
what kind
depends
of
on the
play.
route. Yeah. Okay. That's fair.
Absolutely. You might need a bigger body guy going across the middle or something like that. But if you're throwing a quick slant or a quick out or something like that, or a bomber deep, yeah, I think I'd rather have Jackson in there.
That's fair.
So, all right. So that pretty much rounds out the wide receiver talk. Oh, wait a minute. Hang on. I got to read this. Is that sorry, Link don't agree Burks to be traded or top? Yeah, I could see it both ways, but we've talked about Burks a lot and his inability to fall correctly and just injure himself. Even Callahan noted that he falls awkward sometimes, I think was the words he used, which is very telling right there. So
if I get a 4th or 5th for Burks, he's gone. Personally, I feel like yes, he has the potential to be a good receiver, but we're starting to see the turnover of this roster from the J-Rob era to what this team wants to do now. And does he have potential? Does he have size? Does he have ability? Absolutely. Does he have the consistency? Does he have the track record of being available? And to me, that's a no. And for him to take up a roster spot when you've got other guys like, I'll say it, like when you've got guys like Bryce Oliver, who are an infusion of youth, and you've got availability, and you've seen what he can do, you've seen the quickness, you've seen the catching ability. If I could get a 5th for Burks and put somebody like Bryce Oliver on this team, to me, that's a win.
I agree with you there. I definitely don't disagree with you. How about that? I hope we get to keep Kearis Jackson around just because he's injured. I know we get to keep Colton Dowell, but I don't know about Kearis. I don't know how that works, really. If we're allowed to say he's on injured reserve and just take him off the but if that works out that way, that would be fantastic. I would love it. So moving on from there, though, let's move on. Tight ends.
Yep, for me it was 4. This was a given for me. I thought it was 4 going into the last game. Still believed it was 4. Obviously, Chig has a spot on this team. Wiley, obviously, we'll see what's going on with his injury, but I think he'll be good to go by at least week 2, if not week 1. And then DMR, we talked about him earlier. One of those guys that just keeps showing up and stacking games. Thought he was a lock. Still think he's a lock. And Nick Vannett, he offers you something a little different at the tight end position. The one thing I will say, that screen he caught, I think it was on the first series, the screen he caught, I'd like to see a little more explosiveness there, but he offers you something in the blocking game. I think he's still too valuable an asset to leave off this roster. I do think he'd be picked up if you let him walk. So, yeah, 4 tight ends was kind of a given for me. A lot of people say, 7 wide receivers over 4 tight ends, but I just think there's too much talent at that position, too much depth at that position, and with what this offense wants to do, the more weapons you have, the better. So for me, it was 4 tight ends.
All right, so I alluded to it earlier. I don't want to even say it now, but I agree with you. 4 tight ends. That DMR kid, I feel like, I'll say this. I feel like if you let, Kearis Jackson or whoever you would consider your 7th wide receiver, you let him hit the free market and you let DMR hit the free market. Which one do you think would get snatched up first?
Exactly.
I mean, how many wide receivers are out there available that can do the things that our 7th wide receiver can do?
Yep.
How many people are out there that are built like DMR that can move like DMR? I can't let him go, man. I can't let him get away. I'm sorry. That's just the way I feel.
Yeah, and then with Chig's inconsistencies, I mean, if he comes out of the gate struggling, DMR kind of offers you a lot of the same threat that Chig does. So for me, yeah, somebody just see, that's what I'm saying. If Chig comes out of the gate and he doesn't start strong, don't be surprised if DMR comes in and does exactly what you expected Chig to do going into the season.
Yeah, let me go ahead and answer a question for you, Matthew. Yes, one of my biggest answers, or one of my biggest attributes that I want to see in a football player, is consistency. That's why I love NWI now. because he is like the most consistent player over the inconsistent time in Tennessee. So yeah, I agree there, Scoob. Yeah, DMR probably will be a starter next year. Probably him and Wiley is what I'm guessing right now, but who knows what'll happen. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have a whole lot of faith in Chig, just like I don't have a whole lot of faith in Treylon Burks. Same kind of deal. They both rub me the same way. Coming out of the draft, they looked hot. They looked great at their rookie season.
Yep.
And then they didn't look great in their sophomore season, but then they kind of come back on, but then they go away, but then they come back on.
Yeah, and I mean, like you just said, when they're on, and they can be great players, but consistent. But when you look at what Callahan wants in this team, it's consistency. I think he's made that very clear with who he starts, who he plays, who he goes to in clutch situations. And yeah, I completely agree. I think consistency is the most important thing. And again, I can't say it enough. We're starting to see some of this turnover happen. And Chig is another one of those guys who, if he doesn't show out and perform for this coaching staff, they're going to want to bring in their own guys like DMR.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, the fourth one is Van Nant for me. I'm sorry that I didn't say that, but yes. We'll move on, although I'm going to do mine first.
Okay.
I think we differed a little bit here. I don't know. I don't remember. But J.C. Latham, Skoronski, Cushenberry, Radens, and NPF obviously are the starters. Then we got Jaron Christensen, I think is how you say his name. Daniel Brunskill, I think, is the backup center. Leroy Watson, I think, is the swing tackle. Jalen Duncan, kind of the backup swing tackle. And then John Ajoku for me. What do you feel like, Link?
Yeah, no, I agree with the only one I think I had different was Rupchich. Obviously didn't see exactly what you wanted to see out of him in these last couple preseason games, but I still think he's got a lot of talent. The one that I really pointed to was Christian. It's another Bengals guy. Callahan's comfortable with him. They brought him in. Feel like he's a lock on this. Brunskill, I feel like, is a lock. This kind of left Corey Levin on the outside looking in. He's done his best to try to stay on this team. I think this is the year that they let him go. That's really the only one that was kind of questionable to me. But again, I think these 10 guys give you the best opportunity to win, especially with what they want to do, which we saw, pulling guards, and it also leaves you with that jumbo set option. We've seen them do the QB sneaks. We've seen them, run up the middle when they get close to the end zone with Pollard. So yeah, I think those are the 10 best guys that you could put out there. So not too far off. I think just that one difference, but pretty similar.
Yeah, the main difference I saw in yours is that you didn't have Leroy Watson on there.
Yeah, I didn't. And that's where I had the Rupchich difference. And I don't know if it's just a feeling for me, but I feel like the size of Rupchich, it's a guy that Callahan likes, and that's the only one that I would see that could get that spot over him. Okay. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I feel like those are kind of interchangeable for me on that one. I just went with my gut and had Rupchich on there.
Yeah, I'll agree, Scoop. I'm just happy to see that the starting guys actually looked like they knew what they were doing, who they were supposed to block. Far cry from last year. But since we got it up, let's go with yours for the defensive line. Mm-hmm. What you got on the D line, man?
Yeah, I had the 5 with Davidson on IR. I feel like once he's available, he's probably taking Anderson's spot. But just right there with Simmons, Sweat, Joseph Day, Colburn. I mean that's a powerhouse. Feel like those are the best guys you can put out there. Obviously, Simmons and Sweat, they're going to play off each other, eat up blocks. Colburn's really impressed me this preseason. Another big guy who doesn't move quite as well as Sweat, but still moves. I mean, he's still eating up blocks, getting around, trying to get to the quarterback. We saw him chase somebody down in the Seahawks game. Yep. So, yeah, I think that's the best 5 you can put out there. And then, like I said, Davidson, when he's available to come back, he probably takes that Anderson spot there. But I do think they keep 5 on the line.
Yeah, let's see. I can't even remember now. Yeah, I kept 6. Mm-hmm. So I guess we differed there a little bit. But yeah, the normal ones: Simmons, Sweat, Joseph Day. Those are all does. Mm-hmm. I think where we differ a little bit, I like Quentin Bohanna.
Yep.
Big dude, got some experience there, so I feel like that might actually be useful. And Keandre Colburn, I like him as well. But TK McClendon, for me, he's just a big, long, athletic guy, smaller than your average D lineman. I think they actually have him listed as a defensive end instead of a defensive tackle. But still, the point is, I feel like he has shown me enough that I would like to see what he can do in the regular season.
Yeah, and the only difference for me there, I was going to put TK McClendon on there, but I can't remember exactly what spot it was. We may have not gotten to it yet, but there was one spot where it was between keeping this guy at this position and having depth there, and then keeping TK McClendon and having depth on the defensive line. And I feel pretty confident with the health of this defensive line. Whereas when you get to somewhere like corners, it's a little questionable with Awuzie, with Sneed. Are they going to be able to make it all year? So I'd rather have a little bit of depth at another position than having that extra depth piece on your defensive line. Again, I feel like if something happens, you can go out and find a TK McClendon replacement easier than you can find some other replacements at certain positions.
Yeah, man, I hate to say it, but Aiton was one of those guys. Like, what was the dude that we got from the Denver or whatever? I can't remember his name. Shane Ray.
Yes. Yep.
It's like him, man. Both of them, they look good, I guess, just not good enough, man.
Yep.
I mean, there are just so many good, talented people on this team right now. You can't afford to give up a roster spot for somebody that doesn't look like they can turn into something great.
And Aiton, again, these guys are a little bit easier to hide on a practice squad than some other positions. That was it for me. When I'm looking at these guys on the defensive line, the depth pieces, the McClendons, the Aitons, they're easier to hide on the practice squad and keep around than letting one of your receivers go. And that's why at that position, I just felt like they're better off keeping the five, keeping some guys on the practice squad, because I don't think they're going anywhere realistically. I could be wrong. I just feel like these are guys you're going to be able to keep around if you need them and call them up.
Yep, I agree 100%. Let's see what we got next here. Cornerbacks. L'Jarius Sneed, Chidobe Awuzie, Roger McCreary. Those are all duds. Jarvis Brownlee, honestly, I think is a dub by now. And then I got a weird one, Eric Garror.
I can see
now,
why.
I was going to say, my explanation for Eric Garror is he does actually make a lot of plays for as small of a guy as he is. He plays a lot bigger than kind of like Roger McCreary, but just not that good. But also huge ability on special teams, and I think that's where his value really comes into play. So I feel like we keep a defensive back depth piece. I don't know if you call him a safety or a cornerback. I feel like he's a little small to be a safety, even though we listed him as one last year, or they tried to play him off as one last year. But I still feel like he's a cornerback. So there you go. There's my explanation as to why I kept Garror.
Yeah, and the difference for me was letting Garror go and keeping Trey Avery. I want to put a side note in. I do not think that Trey Avery is the best option at corner. Hopefully, all these guys can stay healthy, and Trey Avery does not see the field. But the reason
Great
that I
special
went with
teamer.
Sure. The reason I went with Avery over Eric Garror is because I feel like he gives you a little bit better spot at the corner position than Garror does. Garror just a little bit smaller, doesn't have the size, and that's why I kept four running backs. I let Garror go because I'd rather have Haskins on special teams than Garror on special teams. And then that left me with deciding who's the better corner, who's the more experienced corner. Is it Garror? Is it Trey Avery? Ultimately, I decided to go with Trey Avery on that one. So that's a little bit of an explanation. I don't want to see any of these guys touch the field at corner, though, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Let's move right along into your inside linebackers.
Yeah, you can see Campbell is still on there. Unfortunately, that one hurts. I think I had a little bit of disclaimer on the next page as far as who I would put in that position if Campbell was not available. Obviously, we know that he is not now. Yeah, I had Gifford on there pending the Campbell injury status, so you could basically put Gifford in that spot. And then you had Eric Gray and Wallow on there. Still feel like those are guys that could make this roster when they come back healthy. Gray especially, I think he can still be a pretty important part of this defense. I think they keep him around. But yeah, for me, it was 5 inside linebackers total. So yeah, that's what I went with. Obviously, Kenneth Murray is going to be your green dot. Gibby's going to come out, be the backup to him. But man, this Campbell one hurts because all these other guys, and here's why I say this. Here's why I hate this the most. All these other guys that we're going to talk about, they are backups to Kenneth Murray. They do what Kenneth Murray is supposed to do. A guy like Chance Campbell, who I feel like was pushing for a starting spot against Gibby, he was kind of your direct backup to Gibby. So now you've got four guys who do what Kenneth Murray does, and Gibby becomes an important part of this inside linebacker position, and that kind of scares me a little bit. Going into this season, inside linebacker was a spot I felt like we were struggling at, and this didn't help with the Campbell injury.
Yeah, man, and you have to feel bad for the guy,
Absolutely.
man. I mean, he was on such a huge roll, and just to come up, oh man, yeah, it was killer. My list doesn't look much different from OLB. We've got, ILB, excuse me. Kenneth Murray, Gibbons, Williams, Otis Reese, and then Luke Gifford, because Chance Campbell is injured. That's the only asterisk I made right there, was I did actually fix that.
Yeah,
when I heard about Chance Campbell.
And I won't dig too much into it, but man, this sucks for a guy like Campbell because this is what, the third knee injury, and does this guy even have a path back to the NFL at this point? With 3 knee injuries, it's an ACL. He keeps coming back, he keeps fighting, but at what point do you hang it up, because your body's just not going to let you do it? And he's a guy where I feel like his body's just not going to allow him to be a starter in the NFL.
Well, I would say this. I mean, look, it does look like he's got a reoccurring injury with the knees, but Tajay Spears doesn't even have ACLs, and
That's
he's
true.
successful
That's
in
true.
the NFL. So
That's true.
if you got the will, I feel like you can do a lot. I feel like you can accomplish a lot with just the will of wanting to be there. We'll move on. Outside linebacker, obvious, Landry, Key. And then I went with a little bit of a switch up, but I put Harold Landry, or Jalen Harrell. Good Lord. Jalen Harrell is the next one up, and then Caleb Murphy, and then Rashad Weaver. Because Rashad Weaver has been such a disappointment for me this offseason.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And if I was going in order of depth, I would put Weaver on the back end. Yeah, I'd put Weaver on the back end. Don't be surprised. Wouldn't shock me if Harrell's snap count is higher than Weaver this season. Not at all. So Weaver's been a huge disappointment for me, even in this last game. But yeah, I'm struggling for this guy to make the cut. I just don't know if you have anybody better that could take his spot right now on the depth. If you had anybody else that was comparable to him, I feel like Weaver's having trouble making this roster. But unfortunately, I feel like he's a lock.
I mean, I wouldn't call him a lock just because of how much money he makes and how little production he put out over the preseason. That would scare me a little bit as a coach or a GM, either one, pay for production. But yeah, I probably don't let him go just because of his NFL experience and how big and long he is.
And I would say, other than corner, this is probably the position I'm most scared about with injuries. We've seen Landry get hurt. Obviously, Arden Key, we say we're not facing suspension, but who knows? So this is the one spot where availability concerns me a little bit, and just for that reason, I've got to keep him as a depth piece. And he's another guy that, hey, if you cut him, there's a lot of teams out there looking for outside linebackers, and he may not show what we want to see with the Titans, but somebody else may pick him up and go off his tape from what they thought he could be. So it's one of those that I don't necessarily want to keep him, but just for depth reasons, just for financial reasons, I feel like you have to at this point.
Yeah, and we'll move on to safety. I think that's the last big one we'll talk about. The other three are, does.
Yep.
We don't really even have to talk about those. But the safety position I've got Amani Hooker, Quandre Diggs, Jamal Adams, and Shaheem Carter. And I know I talked to you before about how much I like Shaheem Carter and how I think he's, good. And if you notice throughout my entire roster, all the bubble guys that I kept on the bubble were young guys with high athletic ceilings. So I think that's the design of the Ran Carthon so far that I've seen Ran Carthon's roster building. So I think that's who's going to get the nod, but I'm not sure if I agree with it 100%, but I do like the kid. I think he does play well for the production that he got. But I think yours was a little bit different on safety.
Yeah, the only difference I had Molden, which obviously he's going to be starting on IR, so I wouldn't mind putting Shaheem Carter there in that position until Molden's available to come back. But I did have 4 the same as you. Going to be interesting to see what they do with that safety position. Obviously, you've got guys in Diggs and Adams that are a little bit different as safeties. I feel like Molden was your consistent piece there. Obviously, I think Hooker has a pretty high ceiling, but yeah, I don't think this is going to be a traditional safety in this defense. I think they're going to do a lot of blitz schemes with these guys. Obviously, with what you've got in Adams and Diggs, I just think it's going to be different. So Hooker's going to play that traditional safety role, but seeing what they do with the other guys is going to be interesting to me.
I've heard a little bit of chatter about Mike Brown. And I'll be honest with you, I would not be surprised if Mike Brown was the pick over Shaheem Carter. Yep. So, I mean, that one really could go either way, but either way, I'm not too upset.
Yeah, that's interchangeable to me. And then I feel like when Molden's ready to come back, that spot's his, and both those guys would be relegated to practice squad, whichever one they keep in that position.
Absolutely, 100% agreement. We're both on agreement there. Molden is definitely the starter. Well, I don't know if I'd call him the starter. He is the higher on the totem pole than these guys.
Absolutely. He's the depth chart piece when it comes down and when he's healthy. Yep.
Yeah, and if he hadn't gotten injured in that last game, he would
Absolutely.
be on both of or on my depth chart as well as yours. Yep. So that's it pretty much, guys. We will not be doing our normal shows next week. The next time we come back for a show is September 5th, which is when we start our Thursday shows, which will take place of our Friday shows. So we will have Monday and Thursday. So our pregame show on the 5th is our next show live. Make sure you catch that. If you haven't yet, guys, get on YouTube, like, subscribe, hit that little bell so you get all this amazing entertainment that we're putting out every week. I mean, how can you pass up on this? I honestly can't. I don't know why people just don't put this on repeat all day long. Any final thoughts there, Link, for this week?
No, that's it. Again, guys, we're less than 2 weeks away from regular season. Make sure to catch us on that Thursday for a good pregame. Going to be an interesting one. The Bears are not one to scoff at. They had a great preseason, new quarterback coming in. Going to be real interesting to talk about the game plan and how I expect us to approach this game. So stay with us, stay up to date on all things that we're coming up with, and we'll see y'all next time.
Absolutely. And until next time, tighten up.
Tighten up.
Peace out.